In this video, we're going to learn how to use the folding fin aerial rockets in the OH-58 Delta Kiowa Warrior. The footage used in this video is pre-release software and is intended for promotion and training purposes. Its visual and audio qualities may not represent the final product. Hey everybody, welcome aboard the OH-58 Delta Kiowa Warrior from Polychop for DCS World. Today we're going to take a look at rockets. Absolutely my favorite weapon. I just love shooting them in real life. I'm going to try to add in some clips here when I get a chance. And we're going to talk about how to set these things up and how to use them effectively. Alright, so things we need to have mapped, which we already should have mapped, is our weapon select switch. Again, left, right. Up's going to bring us to our weapon setup page, and then left, right will select the stores. And since we have rockets on either side, we can choose left or right. It's going to bring up all the rockets for us. But before we do any setup, we need to take our master arm switch, bring it up to standby. Got the standby light, and that's bringing power to the system. Now we're going to hit the weapon select switch up, and that brings us to our weapons page. So here we are on the weapons page. The aircraft can see that we have 2 rocket pods. We have 2 zones per pod, Alpha and Bravo. So let's take a look at the pods and figure out what those zones are. See that we've got 2 on top, 3 in the middle, 2 on the bottom. Those 2 and 2, that is your Alpha zone, and the 3 in the center is your Bravo zone. We're going to go to the weapons bit setup page, and then we can select rocket types by zone. So here you can see all the various options of rockets that the Kiowa Warrior could accept. We're not going to talk about flechettes, smoke, MPSM, illumination, mainly because half of these we don't have, and the other half, it's just not the point of this video. We're going to talk about how to use point detonating high explosive, and here we've got 17 pounders, so point detonating, and then remote set. We don't really have that as an option, so we're just going to deal with point detonating, and then we've got our 10 pounders, HE 10 pound point detonating, which is what we're going to deal with. We'll talk about APKWS in a future video. So over here we've got Zone Alpha and Zone Bravo. We can see that both of them are set to 3. That's because we have 10 pounders and all those. So let's say that we did have smoke in Zone Bravo. We could click that. We're going to hit 3 and then we'd put 12. And now it's telling us that in Zone Bravo we have smoke. So I'm going to go ahead and change that back. And now we're back to having 10 pounders in each zone. So once we finish putting what type of rockets we have in the aircraft, then we can go to set up the fuses. Now, one thing to note, in the Apache, the aircraft knows what kind of rockets you have on board. You don't have to tell it. Versus the Kiowa, it has no idea what kind of rockets you have on board. So you do have to make sure that you program this in if you do have different types. All right, so back to the weapons page. Contact fuse and Q distance. Again, really digging into the weeds that we don't need to for these types of rockets. We'll go ahead and click on it just to show. This gives us some options: super quick, bunker, and then 10 to 45. And this is just basically a delay to allow the rocket to get through canopies such as trees or vegetation. So we're not going to worry about that. We'll go ahead and just hit enter. And then contact, this is the range associated with that fusing. So we've got laser, nav, 500 to 8,000 meters. Again, we're not going to mess with that because we're just shooting point detonating high explosive rockets. This would be more involved with your fused type rockets. But again, most of those are not an option within DCS as it stands right now. All right, so that's complete with the weapon setup page. Now we're going to go to the actual weapon sparse VSD page. So we're going to go to that weapon select switch and go left or right because we've got them on both sides of the aircraft. And this brings us up to our weapons page for the rockets. Here we can see this is for using the MMS as a sight. We're not going to be doing that. That's very rare, and usually you're only using that with something like an MPSM or something that you're going to try to fire at long range from a hover. We're going to be doing some diving fire, some close engagements. Just like every other weapons page, it's really like our flight page, just with some weapons data. We've got our waypoints here, waypoint 1, and then we've got our mode, and then those fuse cues that we had already set. Zone is all. We can rotate through the different zones that we have on board, again, A and B. Notice that we can't change which pod. So for instance, we can't have smoke in Zone Bravo on the left side and then have illumination in zone Bravo on the right side. So everything that's in A and everything that's in B in both sides has to be the same. All right, so back to the modes. We've got 4 different modes because we have 2 pods on board. If we only had 1 pod on board, we would only have 2 modes available. So let's go through these. Singles means that each single pod is going to fire 1 single rocket. So it's going to alternate left to right, right to left, and just launch a rocket per impulse. Single pairs means that each pod is going to fire 1 rocket per impulse of the fire switch. Virpil singles means that it will continue to fire 1 rocket per pod for as long as you hold down the fire switch. And Virpil pairs means that it will continue to fire 1 rocket per pod for as long as you hold down the switch. Now, one thing to consider is that you've only got, at best, 14 rockets on board, and in real life we typically wouldn't even carry that because weight was an issue. Rockets weigh anywhere from 34 to 38 pounds, somewhere in there, so they're pretty heavy when you consider how light this aircraft is and how little fuel it can carry with regards to weight. So you may not have a lot of rockets. It was not uncommon to just ride around with singles, maybe single pairs. And the reason being is every shot that you fire is basically a sensing round, right? That first shot that goes out is giving you an idea of where the next shot's going to go unless you make some corrections. And so going out and shooting Virpils, you better be very sure that you are aiming at the right spot, or you're just trying to put down a lot of hate in a short period of time and you don't really care about accuracy. You're just trying to make a lot of noise. I can tell you I've only shot Virpil pairs once in real life, and that was on the range just for fun to see what it looked like. And as usual, we can bring up the video page. It's really kind of useless for what we're going to do, so we're going to leave that off. And otherwise, we're going to head on out to the range. We're going to go singles, because I like to savor my rockets. We'll head out to the range, and we'll put some warheads out. Alright, we're heading on out to the range. I'm going to go ahead and make sure that the aircraft is armed. Again, we're up the weapons page, the sparse VSD for rockets. We're up singles are fusing. Zone is all, so we're going to be using all the rockets. And again, with single, we should be just getting 1 rocket per impulse. Now, if you haven't watched the video about how to use the 50 cal, I encourage you to go back and do that, because essentially we're going to be doing the same thing. We're going to be bringing the aircraft in at a low level fast. We're going to bump up on the target, nose it over, and then just start punching off rockets, see what we can do. Again, that first round is going to be a sensing round. It's going to give us an idea of where the rockets are going, and over time with practice you'll get a better sense of where that first rocket's going to go. Now, I'll admit I have not shot a lot of rockets in the Kiowa because of the way that the builds work. Up until very recently, I didn't have access to rockets in Kiowa, so I'm still kind of figuring out my sight picture. So we're just going to go out here and have a little bit of fun. All right, so I'm going to pull into power. I'm going to go for that far target out there just because I've been talking. So I'm going to bring in some power, try and get my airspeed up. And as we get closer, we'll go ahead and do a cyclic climb. All right, so I'm just kind of letting that cyclic come back just a little bit. We'll climb up. I'll lose some of that airspeed as we transition and turn it into altitude. And then nose it over gently, look for that circle of action, and then fire. All right. Then we're going to turn outbound. So that first one was way off. It's my first rocket of the day. But what we can do is try and remember roughly where we think it landed and kind of move this marker around again by using our mouse. The left click to go up and down, right click to go side to side. So we'll turn outbound and roll back in on that same target. It's important for the bump to keep your speed up as best you can because you're going to need to turn that into altitude. So already I can tell that I'm just a little too slow to try to do this maneuver. So I'm going to continue on for this guy, do a quick bump. Looks like that first rocket was a good hit. Got a little close to the target, but it really doesn't matter if he's burning. But you can see that that first sensing round, I was able to change my target reticle and then use that effectively on the follow-on engagement. Now, if you've watched the 50 cal video, and again, I encourage you to do that, you'll also know that just like the 50 cal, we can shoot rockets from a hover. However, with this configuration, I really wouldn't recommend it. It's really meant for sort of airburst type weapons. We used to do it with the multi-purpose submunitions, which we don't have available in DCS, but we would do that at a hover, use the mass-mounted sight to aim onto targets, get us laser range, and so on and so forth. But when you're just using HEs like this, particularly in a very sparing role, it doesn't make a lot of sense to try to do it at a hover because you're going to be very inaccurate. It's going to be very difficult, particularly because the rockets are going to be pointing somewhat up in the air and you're going to have to be shooting at stuff that's pretty far away. I'm going to go ahead and go to single pairs. We'll roll in on this guy here at the end of the tree line. Now you notice that I'm pulling in my torque. I've got about 93, 94%, and I'm just holding that. I'm not changing that throughout the maneuver. I'm just keeping the nose down, keeping my speed up, trying to get as fast as I can. It's just a gentle cyclic climb back. I'm not changing my power settings at all. It's going to fluctuate because of things are changing aerodynamically. But I'm letting that airspeed roll down to about 60 or so, and I'm gently nosing over. Still have not messed with the collective at all. Looking for that good sight picture. Just kind of walking those rockets in. Looks like we got a hit on that guy. Still have not moved the collective at all. And you can do that as long as you are maintaining a sort of gentle control on the cyclic. You're not yanking it around. If you start yanking the cyclic, you're changing the airflow, then you're going to have to move the collective to kind of keep up with those changes. But in general, I do not move the collective. I just keep that power setting in, and it doesn't really cause any problems, and allows me to just focus more on the cyclic movement and my aiming. Now, unfortunately, the aircraft has no way of knowing how many rockets it's fired, so you have to keep track. At this point, I have no idea how many I've shot, so all we're going to do is roll back in on another target and try to punch off what we have remaining. I doubt we have many remaining, if any at all at this point, but we'll just see what happens. So we're just going to pick our target and head on in to this guy right here, try to punch off the last few that we have. In real life, some of these rockets wouldn't even come out. There may be a bad connection to the igniter, and you'd come back with rockets still in the tube. A lot of times some of these tubes were bad. They would have an X crossed on them, so you knew that you couldn't even put a rocket in there because it wasn't going to work. But in DCS, we probably won't have that problem. Yep, so we're out of rockets. Nothing's coming out. We'll just scare this guy and head on back to the FARP. Well, guys, that's it. Rockets are secretly easy. You just point and shoot. If you haven't figured it out, for the most part, just about every weapon in the Kiowa is exactly the same thing. Point at something, pull the trigger, and shoot. It's probably the closest thing you can be to being a World War I pilot, except this time in a helicopter. I want to say thanks again to Polychop for recreating this awesome aircraft. It's been a lot of fun to sort of relive my younger days in it. And a big thank you, of course, to YouTube and Patreon members for supporting the channel, supporting me and making these videos for you guys. I hope that you're enjoying them, and more importantly, I hope that they're helping, letting you enjoy this aircraft when you finally get your hands on it. We're about 2 weeks out as I'm making this video. Lots of things are still getting tightened down and changed and put into the right place, but I can tell you right now, I'm having a lot of fun with it. It flies really well, it feels really good, and I think you guys are going to enjoy it a great deal. Thanks again for watching. I appreciate you. Hit subscribe and like if you would, please. I really do appreciate it. And we'll talk to you later. Take it easy.